This is a note. Zhuzh your hair. This is a note. Zhuzh hair. Okay? Loosen up. Hey, everybody. Welcome to the first episode of Hot and Bothered with Melyssa Ford. I am Melyssa Ford. Some of you may be familiar with me, but for those of you who are brand new, welcome. Thank you so much for joining me. Let me give you a brief overview of my career. I'm going to keep it short and sweet because I seem to be having a little bit of like a stroke right now. I'm talking to my producers off camera because I am extraordinarily nervous. I don't know why. I do this for a living and have been doing this for many, many years. But right at this moment, I am introducing the world to my baby, and I want the world to tell my baby that it's pretty. So how do I backtrack 25 years? Long story short, started off as a video model, ended up as a cover model for calendars and magazines. That was a transition for me to getting into television hosting. So I started my career with BET, that moved on to Stars in Black and ESPN. I started to get a little bit of the acting bug, so I started acting as well. Then I turned to philanthropy, ended up on some reality TV programs, and then I got situated in the podcast industry. And that was where I feel like I found my niche. So I've been podcasting for 10 years. I started a podcast in LA with a friend of mine, turned into a very big urban podcast, did that for about 4 years. And then I decided to start my own podcast. It was called I'm Here for the Food. And I know some of you foodies are here with me right now. That was a podcast that was born from an idea that was given to me by Barbara Walters. Every year, she used to round out the year by interviewing 10 people that she found to be the most fascinating. And they weren't always celebrities. Sometimes they were Pulitzer Prize winners. Sometimes they were titans of industry. I always liked that concept of interviewing fascinating people. And a lot of times, the most fascinating people to me were people that were marginalized or kind of existing on the fringe of society, people that were, books that were judged by their cover. And I was interested in finding out a more three-dimensional way of looking at them. So my foodies, which was the audience, they never knew who I would interview one episode to the next. This isn't a brand new podcast. This is a rebrand because I still want to focus on interviewing fascinating and interesting people. But now, at this stage of my life and at this age, I want to add a health and wellness, specifically a sexual wellness component to this podcast. What this actually is not just a source of, education and information for you. I'm learning along with you. I have bought nothing but books trying to explain to me what was going on within my body and within my brain. So by having the professionals and the experts that I plan to have on as guests, we are going to learn about this situation together. We are going to navigate what seems like the most disorienting time in your lives together. Because it doesn't have to be the prison sentence that everybody has made it out to seem. Whenever people talk about menopause, it seems like it's always synonymous with hot flashes. I'm 6 years in, I've never had a hot flash. What I did have was night sweats. And that was, oh my God, I don't think I would wish that on my worst enemy. But there is a way to navigate all of this. There's biohacking, there's natural methods, there's holistic methods. And now that menopause is having its moment, there seems to be a whole lot more methods coming down the pipeline and understanding as to what women are going through during this phase in their lives. But at the same time, I don't want to leave the men out of this conversation. And I was just thinking on my drive in here that it seems like as we hit a certain age, their peepees don't work as well as they used to. And their estrogen has raised, so now they've got some boobage. It was just the thought that I had while I was driving today and chuckling in the car on the highway. So that, yeah, But I'm not leaving the men out of this conversation. I will definitely be having professionals and experts talking to men about their sexual health and wellness as well. Not only that, I want to cover subjects that tackle mental health. So these are some of the topics that I will be addressing while during this podcast, each and every episode. So this is what I want you guys to tune in for.
It's because it means a lot to you, so you got to say that.
Yeah, but I mean, it does mean a lot to me. This, I it. I don't know how my producer's going to string all this together. I'm just going to say this because I feel like I am talking like I have a stick up my ass. And he keeps on trying to feed me questions that in my mind's eye, like in my dreams, this was going a completely different way. So I just want to be transparent with y'all. To do this podcast on my own has been like a very daunting idea. The imposter syndrome has been debilitating. I have had at least 6 anxiety attacks. I have thought that I was dying, having a heart attack at least once in the last month. I've been like paranoid and just kind of thinking a hole in my head as to, what I was going to say to you guys, what I was going to talk about, and also what I was going to reveal. Just how candid and transparent are you going to be, Melyssa? Okay, well, so like most women, when I started perimenopause, I had no idea what it was. I just had a slight inkling. And it came by way of my mom saying to me one day out of the clear blue sky, hey, just wanted you to know that I started menopause around the age of 42, so it's probably going to happen to you. She told me this at the age of 41. I was like, what does that even mean? There was no explanation as to what that meant. She didn't describe any kind of symptoms that she had gone through. That was the extent of our conversation. And I started to gather, once I talked to other women, that was the extent of their conversations with their mothers or, their mother figures. And in no way, shape, or form was that any kind of preparation. Needless to say, perimenopause took me by surprise. And by surprise, I mean that I suddenly could not sleep throughout the night. My hair was falling out in clumps. My skin felt like the crypt keeper. My nails were brittle and kept breaking. I could not control my emotions. I felt rage all the time. What is another symptom that, let's talk about sex. Let's talk about my sex life. Did you know that as you get deeper into perimenopause, your vagina starts to atrophy? So when I got told that, I was like, wait, hold on one second here. What? So think about it like this. Every woman who's watching knows what cramps feels like, preceding your period coming. The cramps, depending on what, if you have endometriosis or fibroids or whatever the case is, cramps can be mildly uncomfortable. Have they ever been just mildly uncomfortable for anybody? Right. They just say that in commercials. It's bullshit. Oftentimes, it's horrible. So cramps are usually, PMS preceding a period. And then we get our period. Some of us are not cramping during that time. Some of us are. So that cramping is basically like it's your uterus, it's your cervix, it's all this terrible it's an orchestra, kind of doing what it does. But then as you head into perimenopause and your period starts to disappear, your uterus and cervix and just that orchestra just kind of tapers off and just, it's not really doing much. It's not contracting. It's not doing anything. You know what I mean? And so your pelvic floor kind of just goes to sleep unless you start doing exercises like Kegels or, exercises that you might learn in a yoga or Pilates class. your pelvic floor goes to sleep. And you're not really aware of what that actually means until you sneeze or you laugh and you pee all over yourself. That's what a weak pelvic floor actually means. So, what else happens when you enter perimenopause and your uterus and your cervix have stopped doing that whole contracting thing that they do once a month? Basically, what happens is sex can become really uncomfortable. Like, really uncomfortable. Oh, also, you start to experience dryness. Whoever said that God was a woman, no, there's no way. There's no way that a woman would be doing this to us. She'd be giving it to them, okay? But the reality of the situation is these are some of the things that happen as perimenopause creeps along. Dryness, vaginal dryness, vaginal atrophy, painful sex, weakened pelvic floor. And that's to go along with everything else that's happening, inside of your brain and in your exterior. Oh, also, you get this nice little spare tire like around your midsection that doesn't want to go anywhere. You end up gaining weight that just will not go anywhere. So yeah, it's all freaking awesome. So these are the things that I started to experience. And I was literally like, WTF, why is this happening to me? But the painful sex thing, I was just like, yeah, no, this can't happen. I remember being in my 20s and 30s and having orgasms, feeling like I was talking to God. And I wanted that feeling back. I was like, so that goes away too? Come on. Like, what are we even talking about here? And so I talked to my older girlfriends, and God, I'm about to get so personal. So I talked to my older girlfriends and I asked them, like what happens? Like, do we just like accept celibacy and abstinence and just not do anything? And they're like, well, basically, Melyssa, if you don't use it, you'll lose it. And I was like, what does that even mean, like in practical terms? And they said, well, if you're not having regular sex, buy a dildo. I was like, excuse me? No, wait, I have a vibrator. They were like, no. You need something regularly inserted to kind of keep everything, what's a term that I should use here, Rachel? Lubricated? Intact? I don't know, lubricated, used to, volume, I don't know. The guys over here are squirming in their seats, by the way. I should just say that because I could see it out of my mind, out of the corner of my eye. But these are honestly the kind of conversations that I want to have up here. And I want to bring my girlfriends up to talk about this. And I want to bring, women who are also experts in sexual health and wellness to come up here and talk about this very thing and the ways in which that we can combat this in order to have pleasurable, healthy sex lives well into our 40s, past our 50s, into our 60s, down into our 70s, maybe even our 80s, God willing. So with the onset of all of these symptoms at the same time and trying to communicate with my doctor, like, please tell me what is going on and what is the solution, it led me to understand that the medical industry, by and large, really had no clue what to do with women during this stage of our lives. And the more that I read and the more that I learned from talking to my peers who were, a little bit older than me and had already gone through this experience, the more enraged I became at the fact that it seemed like as women after our childbearing years, that we are largely ignored and devalued by society at large and basically by the medical industry. And it made me furious. And so I made it my mission to try to find ways to educate other women who were going through the exact same experience as I was, to prepare the women who had not reached this stage in their life, but this was coming down the pipeline for them. And I wanted to give them some kind of, education or find experts who were willing to discuss maybe something, alternative or non-traditional methods of treating this phase in your life, so that it's not as disorienting as what I personally experienced. So one thing that I used to hear a lot when I was a kid, or just whatever, much younger years, was, on television you would hear about women going through the change. And I was like, what the hell is that? What is the change? But it always seemed to be like, it always seemed to allude to a woman going through some level of psychosis, and also that she seemed to be kind of being put out to pasture. And so as a child, or a young adult, not really having the experience to go along with hearing these kinds of things, I didn't really understand that this was the stigmatization that comes along with perimenopause and menopause. Just all of the wording and the phrasing around the description of this transitional phase in a woman's life that, I should tell you, lasts between 10 and 20 years. Once I got to the age in which I was knee deep in it, I was just swimming in it. I became really angry at the fact that this was how women were, referred to and discussed, because men don't go through this at all in any way, shape, or form. As men get older, they are regarded as having, becoming distinguished and having character lines, and they get salt and pepper, and oh, they're so, debonair and whatever else. And we get old, wrinkled, and fat. No, I refuse to allow this type of stereotyping and stigmatization to happen. Not when I have seen like innumerable women who in their 40s and 50s and 60s and 70s are just prime examples of vibrancy and beauty and sexiness and all of these other adjectives that I can use that don't ever seem to get used when describing women after the age of 40. And so when it comes to this podcast, that was one of the things that I wanted to do. I wanted to make sure that women felt seen and heard and understood, and could discover new ways of viewing themselves, reframing their own thought process when it came to aging. I like to describe myself as a pro-aging advocate, because I am really, I don't like the term anti-aging. When I was younger, it didn't seem to bother me, but now as I've gotten older, I understand what a privilege it is to get older. And so the whole idea of anti-aging really, really, really makes me hot and bothered, honestly. I think that the beauty industry has, by and large, done us a grave disservice by marketing products as anti-agers, because there is nothing wrong with aging. I think that we get more and more beautiful as time goes on, because we just get settled into the bodies that we have. We get settled into our skin, and we also start to really care a lot less about what people think about us and what people feel about us. And I think that there is so much freedom in being able to really not look for any kind of external validation. The world teaches us as women to seek external validation almost from the day we're born. And so the day that we suddenly feel mentally free of those shackles is the greatest day of our lives. And in my opinion, it starts around this time.
Well, this is just you, right? So you have a personal example that that we talked about. And I think the women in your audience would appreciate, you giving us this part of you.
I don't know if I want to talk about it.
I'm not trying to force you.
I don't think I do.
Okay, no pressure.
For those of you that might not know very much about my career, I started as a music video model. And at one point, that was seen as a really amazing thing. We were, placed on pedestals. Our popularity grew. It was the reason why magazines wanted me on the covers, calendars wanted me on their covers. It was very lucrative for me and other girls. And it was a very pivotal point in my life in terms of making connections, and also just kind of coming into my own as a young woman, embracing my sexuality, and just kind of coming to define, who I was during that stage of my life. But then there was a dramatic shift in the industry, and video modeling suddenly started to be regarded like it was sex work. And this was before we used the term sex work. We are so much more evolved now these days than we were back in the early 2000s. Back then, it was called prostitution. And that's how we were regarded. I don't know how the pedestal got kicked out from underneath us, but boy, did it ever. And I spent a lot of years being stigmatized, and thought of in a very one-dimensional manner by people. It was only when people would meet me or they would hear me talk that they realized, oh, wow, this girl can, chew gum and walk at the same time. She could string a sentence together. Oh, wow, she got a vocabulary. But I have always been very, I don't know what's the word I would use. Respectability politics have always kind of pissed me off, because I'm just like, when it comes to respectability politics, who is the fucking morality police? Who gets to say what's right and what's wrong? So fast forward later on in my life, the pandemic happens. People don't know how they're going to, make a living. If you had a job beforehand and now you're working from home, great on you. Some people, that is not what happened, especially if you are in the freelance business, especially if you were in the entertainment industry freelancing. A lot of times people just went without work for a really long time during the pandemic. And it was during that time that I decided to start an OnlyFans page. OnlyFans has a really negative connotation just because of, some of the things that some people do on it. Other people, they keep it very PG. I myself felt very comfortable just doing the minimum, the same things that I offered up whenever I did my magazine covers and features and stuff like that. Lingerie, bikinis, implied nudity, but never anything sexual or whatever the case is. Not that there's anything wrong with that. It's just my personal choice. And I didn't think that anything would be wrong with this, until the day that I found out that I was on a short list of people to speak on a mental health panel at Harvard University. And they were all very interested in me until they found out that I had an OnlyFans page. And what I was told was that it was a non-starter in terms of consideration for me to speak on that panel. What they missed out on having me on that panel is somebody that was extraordinarily candid and transparent about all of her mental health struggles that she's had throughout the course of her career, the depression, the anxiety, the suicidal ideations, the traumatic brain injury that I got from a car wreck and everything that, transpired after that in terms of having literally a broken brain, and then fast forwarding and a year and a half after that, and my mom passing away and having to struggle through grief during perimenopause. So that was really what they lost out on, simply because they couldn't get over the fact that I had an OnlyFans page without ever looking at the page. I realized that I had to create my own platform all over again to combat things like that, to combat stereotypes, to combat the stigmatization that comes along with a woman who owns her sexuality, has, a sense of her own personal agency, and doesn't really let anybody dictate who she is, what she does, where she goes, and who she does it with. There's a war on women right now. There is a war on our bodies. There is a war for control over our bodies right now. And to me, that was a very subtle indication of control for me. And I would bet dollars to donuts that it was a man who made that decision, that it was a non-starter. But I digress. I don't know. So I'm about to do some rapid fire. Hit me. Hot or cold? Like in terms of what weather? Hot. Shower or bath? Bath. Ooh. Are we talking about men? Chocolate or vanilla? Both.
Chocolate or vanilla?
Oh, Christ on a cracker. Chocolate.
Big or small?
Big or small? Big. High heels or Uggs? My ankles would say Uggs, but my pride says heels. Candles or incense? Candles. Morning or night? Night. Hot stone or deep tissue? Deep tissue, 1,000%. Go for a hike or Netflix and chill? Is this with a date? Netflix and chill, just to leave all opportunities open. Last question.
Take the subway or drive a Honda Accord?
Take the subway or drive a Honda Accord. Listen, okay, I can be incognito. I can put on a hat and sunglasses. You won't know who I am, but what you're not going to do is find me on the subway anymore. I'm driving that Honda Accord. So I want to make something clear to you guys, that we're not just going to be talking to doctors and professionals, even though some of the doctors and professionals that I have lined up, they are the furthest thing from sterile. They have got charismatic personalities. You're going to learn so much from them. But one thing that I would really, really like to put in front of you as representation is the people that seem to have figured it all out. I'm talking about women that I follow on my Instagram profile. They have embraced gray. They are fashion forward. They just have this effervescent kind of attitude and aura about them, and they are living unapologetically. Representation matters. And what I really, really want to do when it comes to having guests up here is I want to showcase the people that can give you a snapshot into what the next chapter of your life can look like. Because when I say that the onset of all of this is very disorienting, it just is. But these people seem to have come through the fire and come out of it looking and feeling and just living and existing better than ever. So these are the types of people that I also want to have on the show so that they represent to you that life is not over after 40. Life isn't over after 50. Life might actually just be beginning at that time in your life. And these are the examples that I want to show you of those kinds of individuals that seem to have figured it out.